So, I never thought I'd be the type to end up posting here. But after everything that's happened, I just need to get this off my chest. My 34M wife, Emily, 29F, and I have been married for 6 years. We don't have kids, never really felt the urge. I guess I thought things were fine. I work a lot, sure, but I always try to make time for her, you know? Date nights, the occasional weekend trip, that kind of thing. But I realize now, I might have been blind to a lot. It all started when Emily started using this Uber guy for all her errands. I mean, she doesn't drive, so it wasn't weird at first. She'd mention him a couple times in passing, say how professional and reliable he was. His name was Max, and yeah, it's normal to appreciate a driver who shows up on time, right? That's what I thought anyway. She'd always be like, "Oh, I'm going out to the store," or "I'm meeting the girls for lunch." And every damn time, it was Max driving her. She never mentioned any other drivers. I wasn't exactly suspicious at this point, just thought she liked the convenience. I even remember joking one time, "Maybe I should start driving you everywhere, save you the Uber bills." And she just laughed, saying, "Oh please, you wouldn't even know the shortcuts like Max does." Things started getting weird when her trips out got more frequent. I'd come home from work, and she'd always be out, sometimes without even leaving a note or telling me where she was going. And she'd be gone for hours. When I asked her, she'd just say she was shopping or getting her nails done. Then there were the excuses. Like, how many times can someone forget their phone or leave their wallet at home and need a lift from the same guy? It just didn't sit right with me. But again, I didn't push it. I trusted her. Or maybe I was just trying to avoid the uncomfortable truth that something. One night, she came back late, like really late. I didn't think much of it at the time, just brushed it off as her being I. So, after that night, things started to spiral. Emily's late nights with the girls became more and more frequent, and I started to notice little things that didn't add up. For one, she stopped inviting me to anything. We used to go out together with her friends, but now, it was always, "Oh, it's just us girls," or "You wouldn't enjoy this one, babe." The excuses kept piling up, and I tried to stay calm, but it gnawed at me. And Max? He practically became a ghost I never saw but always heard about. Anytime she needed to go somewhere, Max was there. I swear, it felt like he was her personal chauffeur. I casually asked her one day, "Why don't you just use a different driver? I'm sure Uber has more than one." She shot me a look and said, "Max is reliable. I don't have to wait for some rando to show up." God, you're so controlling sometimes. That hit me wrong. I didn't even push back. Just let it slide again. But that wasn't the worst part. The late-night texting started soon after. Emily had always been pretty glued to her phone, but now it was excessive. I'd notice her smirking at her screen or quickly locking it when I walked into the room. One night, as we were watching a movie, her phone buzzed, and she got up immediately, saying she had to take a call outside. Now call me crazy, but who the hell needs to take a call outside at 10 p.m.? It was cold as hell that night. I asked, "Who's calling this late?" And she didn't even look at me when she said, "Just one of the girls. We're planning a spa weekend." She went outside for nearly 20 minutes. When she came back in, her mood was off. She sat down, didn't even finish the movie, just said she was tired and went to bed. The next day, I tried to casually check her phone, but of course she had a password now. This was new. We'd never hidden things from each other like that. So I asked, "What's up with the password?" And she snapped again. "Jesus, do you need to go through my phone now too?" I thought we trusted each other. I wanted to believe her. I really did. But my gut was screaming at me that something was going on. I started paying closer attention. I wasn't ready to accuse her of anything just yet, but I couldn't shake the feeling that things were slipping out of control. Then came the day that really set me off. I was working from home and heard her on the phone in the other room. She didn't know I was still there. She was laughing, and her voice got all soft, The way she used to talk to me when we first started dating. I heard her say, "Yeah, I can't wait to see you later. I'll wear that dress you like." My stomach dropped. When I walked into the room, she hung up immediately, face flushed. "Who was that?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. "Oh, just Stacy. We're planning our next girls' night," she said without missing a beat, like she hadn't just gotten caught acting all flirty. I didn't believe her for a second, but I let it go. For now. I knew something was coming. I just didn't know when. At this point, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was horribly wrong. Every interaction with Emily felt like it was laced with tension, like she was a ticking time bomb waiting to explode. And Max? His name was thrown around so much, I felt like I knew him without ever having met the guy. He had become this shadow in our marriage, lurking in the background while I pretended everything was fine. A week later, Emily told me she was going out for dinner with her girlfriends, again. This time, something clicked in me. I wasn't going to let it slide. I had to know. I didn't want to be the paranoid husband stalking his wife, but my gut wouldn't let me rest until I knew the truth. So when she left that evening, I decided to follow her. I made sure to keep my distance, not wanting her to see me. She was dressed way too nice for just a girls' night. Tight black dress, heels, full makeup, the works. She hadn't dressed like that for me in months. It felt like I was watching a stranger walk out the door. I followed her car from a few streets back as Max picked her up. They didn't head to any restaurant downtown or to her usual spots. Instead, they pulled up at some secluded little park on the edge of town. I parked a block away and walked up quietly, hiding behind some trees. I could see the car through the gaps in the bushes. My heart was pounding in my ears as I realized they weren't just talking. Max leaned over from the driver's seat, and I could see their lips meet. They were kissing, deep and passionate, like two people who had been doing this for a while. It wasn't some innocent flirtation, it was full-blown making out. My chest tightened, and for a second I couldn't breathe. I wanted to barge in right then and there, but I needed to see how far this went. After a few minutes of kissing, Emily climbed into the back seat with him. I couldn't see clearly from where I was, but their silhouettes were unmistakable. Her dress was hiked up, and their movements made it painfully clear what was happening. Right there in the back of the taxi. I felt sick. My stomach churned as I watched my wife having sex with some random Uber driver in his car. Everything I thought I knew about her shattered in that moment. She wasn't the woman I married. She wasn't the woman I'd built a life with. I stood there frozen, my mind racing between anger, hurt, and disbelief. Part of me wanted to scream, break the windows, drag her out of that car and demand answers. But instead I took a deep breath and quietly walked back to my car. I couldn't face her then. I needed time to think, to figure out what the hell I was going to do next. When I got home, I sat in the dark for hours staring at the wall. I was numb. The person I trusted most had just betrayed me in the worst possible way, and I had seen it with my own eyes. I knew one thing for sure, I couldn't pretend anymore. This wasn't something I could forgive or look past. When she got home later that night, she acted completely normal. She smiled, kissed me on the cheek, and said, "Dinner was great, babe. We should go there sometime." The audacity of her. After what I'd just seen, after what she'd just done, she walked in like nothing had happened, like she hadn't just been screwing some random guy in the back of a taxi. It took everything in me not to snap right there. But I wasn't ready for the confrontation yet. I needed to understand how deep this went, to hear her lie to my face one more time before I made any moves. So I played along. I smiled, asked her about her dinner, and pretended I hadn't just witnessed my entire marriage crumble. She told me this whole story about how her friends had gotten into an argument, how they almost had to leave the restaurant early. She even added that Max had kindly waited for her while she handled it all. The lies just rolled off her tongue like it was second nature. She kept going, talking about her friends, what they wore, the food they ordered. She was painting this whole fake scenario with such detail, and I couldn't help but feel disgusted. But the more she talked, the clearer it became, She wasn't just cheating, she was living a completely separate life, a life where she felt comfortable lying to my face without a second thought. Over the next few days, I started gathering evidence. I knew I couldn't confront her without something solid, something she couldn't weasel her way out of. I checked our shared bank account, noticed charges from places I'd never heard of, places she'd claimed to have never been. Late-night Ubers when she said she was with her girlfriends. It was all right there in front of me. And then came the texts. One night, when she was in the shower, I finally got a hold of her phone. She was careless, leaving it on the counter unlocked. I didn't hesitate. My hands were shaking as I scrolled through her messages, and there it was, right at the top, Max. They weren't even hiding it. He was texting her things like, "I can't wait to see you again, baby," and "last night was amazing." But the worst part? She was just as into it. Her replies were even worse. "I wish we didn't have to sneak around," and "you make me feel alive in ways he never could." I nearly threw her phone across the room when I read that. She had the nerve to compare me to this guy, this driver, like I was some kind of background character in her little fantasy world. She even sent him pictures. Selfies of her in that tight black dress, the same one she wore the night I caught them. My blood boiled. I felt the heat rise in my chest, my fists clenched so tight I thought I'd break something. But I held it together. I needed more. I kept scrolling, finding weeks, months even, of messages. They'd been seeing each other almost the entire time she was using him as her driver. It was all a game to her. The sneaking around, the lying, the excuses. Every time I had asked her where she was or why she was acting weird, she had just looked me in the eyes and lied without a shred of guilt. I put her phone back just as she stepped out of the shower, drying her hair with a towel. She smiled at me, completely unaware that her entire double life was unraveling in front of her. I couldn't even look at her. Every time she opened her mouth, all I could hear was her deceit. Every touch, every smile, it all felt fake now. That night I slept on the couch. I couldn't bear to be in the same bed with her. She asked me what was wrong, tried to coax me back with her usual manipulative charm, but I told her I had work stress and needed space. She didn't push it, probably relieved I wasn't digging into her lies. But the reality was, I had made my decision. I wasn't going to stay with someone who could do this to me, who could live a lie this deep. I just had to find the right moment to blow it all up. The next morning, I woke up on the couch, stiff and sore, but the anger in me was still burning. I had decided that I was done pretending. I wasn't going to be that clueless husband who let his wife walk all over him. It was time to blow her whole little game apart. But before I could even plan my move, she threw another curveball at me. Emily came down the stairs all cheerful, acting like everything was perfectly normal. She kissed me on the forehead and said, "Hey babe, I was thinking, we haven't had a real weekend away in forever. Maybe we could plan a little trip. Just the two of us. Get out of town, relax, reconnect." I nearly choked on my coffee. Reconnect? After everything she'd done? After everything I knew? I had to fight the urge to laugh in her face. She was unbelievable. It was like she knew things were off but figured she could patch it all up with a weekend away, like we were just having some minor marital problems. I played along though, pretending to be interested, nodding and saying, "Yeah, maybe we should." In my mind though, I was already planning how I was going to end this. The final straw came that night. She told me she was heading out for another girls' night, and would be back late. This time, I didn't even need to follow her. I knew exactly where she was going and what she was doing. So, instead, I decided I was going to be waiting for her when she got back, only this time, I wasn't going to let her bullshit her way out of it. I made sure everything was in place. Her phone records, the texts, the receipts from all the late-night Uber trips. I printed out every single thing I'd found. I didn't want there to be any chance for her to wriggle out of this. When she finally got home around midnight, I was sitting at the kitchen table, all the evidence spread out in front of me. She walked in, her face flushed, a fake smile on her lips, and immediately froze when she saw the papers laid out. What's this? She asked, her voice wavering for the first time. Good. Let her feel nervous. I looked her dead in the eyes and said, It's everything, Emily. All your lies. All the times you went behind my back. You and Max. Her face went pale. She opened her mouth, probably to throw out some half-assed excuse, but I wasn't having it. I slammed my hand on the table and said, Don't even try it. I know everything. She started stammering. I don't know what you think you saw, but it's not what you think. Max is just a friend. A friend? A friend you've been screwing in the back of his car? You think I didn't see that? I cut her off, my voice rising. I was done with her lies. I could see the panic setting in on her face, but she was still trying to spin it. No, that's not true. He was just comforting me. I was upset, and things got out of hand, but it wasn't like that, she said, tears starting to form in her eyes. Classic move. The waterworks. She always did that when she knew she was cornered. I shook my head, disgusted. You think I'm stupid? I have all the texts, Emily. The bank statements. The receipts. You've been lying to me for months. Her face twisted from panic to anger in a second. The tears dried up as quickly as they'd come. Well, maybe if you weren't so distant, I wouldn't have needed him, she snapped, her voice suddenly venomous. Maybe if you paid attention to me instead of working all the damn time, I wouldn't have had to find someone who actually gives a shit about me. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. She was actually trying to blame me for her cheating. Don't you dare turn this around on me, I said through clenched teeth. You're the one who went behind my back. You're the one who lied to my face every damn day. She folded her arms, glaring at me. Oh, please. You act like you're so innocent. You've been checked out of this marriage for years, and you know it. You didn't even care until you found out about Max. Her words were like poison, but I wasn't going to let her get to me. I kept my voice steady, cold. I want a divorce, Emily. I'm done. There's nothing left to talk about. She blinked, taken aback for a moment, and then the hysteria kicked in. She started pacing around the kitchen, yelling, You're going to divorce me? After everything I've done for you? You can't just throw this away because of one mistake. We can fix this. I shook my head. No, we can't. I'm done. That's when she lost it. She started screaming, knocking things off the counter, throwing whatever she could get her hands on. You're not leaving me. I'll ruin you. You think you can just walk away? You'll regret this. But her threats didn't faze me. I was already done, mentally checked out of the mess she had turned our marriage into. All I could feel was relief. Emily's screams echoed through the house, but I stood my ground. I wasn't going to let her manipulate me any longer. As she raged on, knocking over chairs and slamming cabinet doors, I felt a strange sense of calm wash over me. The truth was out. I had finally broken free from her web of lies. Stop it! I shouted, raising my voice to cut through her chaos. This isn't about you anymore. This is about me taking back my life. She paused, staring at me with a mix of disbelief and rage, her chest heaving as she fought to catch her breath. You really think you can just walk away? You're making the biggest mistake of your life. Am I? I asked, my voice steady. I've spent years trying to make this work, trying to trust you. You've betrayed that trust, and you think a weekend trip can fix it all? It's over. Her face twisted in anger, and for a moment, I thought she might lash out at me again. But instead, she collapsed onto the floor, sobbing uncontrollably. It was almost pathetic. Part of me felt a twinge of sympathy, but I quickly squashed it. She had made her choices, and now she had to face the consequences. You don't mean that, she cried, wiping her tears with the back of her hand. We can fix this. Just give me a chance. No, I replied, shaking my head. I've given you too many chances already. I won't be manipulated anymore. I won't be your backup plan while you run around with Max or whoever else you find. I deserve better than this. Her sobs turned into angry whimpers. You're going to regret this, you bastard. You think I won't fight back? You think I won't tell everyone about how you never pay attention to me? You'll be the villain in this story. I shrugged, feeling strangely liberated. Let them think what they want. I'm done playing the part of the fool in your drama. With that, I turned and walked toward the front door, leaving her crumpled on the floor. I didn't look back. I needed to get out of that toxic space. I stayed at a friend's place that night, my mind racing with everything that had just happened. I called my brother, needing to talk it out, to let the chaos simmer down. As I shared the story, his reaction was swift. You're doing the right thing, man. You deserve better. It's going to hurt, but you'll be okay. His support meant everything. After hanging up, I started drafting an email to my lawyer, outlining the divorce process. I had never imagined I'd be in this position, but now that I was, it felt empowering to take control. The next few days were a blur of paperwork, meetings, and a whirlwind of emotions. Emily tried to reach out, calling and texting nonstop. Each time, I ignored her. I knew she was trying to pull me back into her drama, trying to manipulate me into feeling guilty, but I refused to play her games any longer. The inevitable confrontation came when I returned home to grab some clothes and personal items. I walked in to find her pacing the living room, her face a mix of desperation and anger. "Where have you been?" she demanded, eyes wide with rage. "You think you can just disappear? You think this is going to be easy for you?" I sighed, feeling drained. "Emily, this isn't a negotiation. I'm not going to change my mind. I'm done. Don't you dare walk out on me. You can't just give up," she screamed, her voice breaking. "Did you give up when you were sleeping with Max? Did you think about what this would do to me?" I shot back, my patience waning. "Stop bringing him into this," she shouted. "He's just a distraction. You have no idea how lonely I've been. You've been so focused on work that I had to find someone who would listen to me." Her words hit me like a punch in the gut, but I stood firm. "You chose to cheat, Emily. That's on you. I tried to be a good husband, and you threw it all away for a cheap thrill. You made your bed, now lie in it." She froze, her expression shifting from anger to realization. "You're serious about this?" she said, her voice quieter, almost defeated. "I am," I said, trying to keep my tone even. "It's over." She fell silent, her eyes downcast, and I finally felt a flicker of pity. "You can blame me all you want, but you need to understand that this was your choice. You could have talked to me. You could have come to me with your problems, but you didn't. You chose betrayal." I grabbed my bag and headed toward the door, ready to leave that chapter behind. But as I stepped out, I heard her voice one last time. "Fine. Go ahead and ruin everything. You'll regret it, and when you do, don't come crawling back to me." I turned back, looking her square in the eyes. "I won't be crawling back, Emily. I'll be moving forward." And with that, I closed the door behind me, sealing off the chaos of our past and stepping into a future I finally felt I could own. The weeks that followed were a whirlwind. The divorce process kicked off, and I soon found myself deep in the trenches of legal paperwork and meetings. I never imagined I'd be in this position, and I still couldn't believe how fast everything had unraveled. I was finally doing what I should have done months ago, cutting ties with someone who had made a mockery of our marriage. Emily hired a lawyer who was just as aggressive as she was. The first time we met in the lawyer's office, I could feel the tension in the air. Emily sat across from me, arms crossed, her expression hardening into that familiar mask of defiance. I could sense the bitterness radiating off her. She hadn't taken the news well. She was furious I'd had the audacity to leave her and not the other way around. As we went through the initial motions, Emily kept trying to play the victim, painting herself as the misunderstood wife who had been neglected. It was frustrating to listen to her attempt to rewrite history, but I was determined to stay focused. I wasn't going to let her manipulate the narrative any longer. One of the most shocking moments came during one of the mediation sessions. Emily's lawyer pulled out a bunch of texts that I had sent her during our relationship, text messages I thought were harmless, words of affection and support. The lawyer claimed I had used them as manipulative tools against her emotional state. I nearly laughed out loud. It felt like they were grasping at straws. Really? You're using my kindness as evidence against me? I said, unable to keep the disbelief from my voice. Emily's lawyer glared at me, and Emily looked smug for a moment. It's not just that, she said, a smirk creeping onto her face. You never really listened to me. You always thought you were the perfect husband. But you didn't see how lonely I was. That's how I ended up with Max. I felt my blood boil. You think I'm to blame for you cheating? I tried to be there for you. You shut me out. The lawyer intervened, trying to steer the conversation back to more productive topics, but I was done with the charade. I told them both to keep the focus on the facts and to stop trying to twist the narrative. I had all the evidence of Emily's infidelity, and I wasn't afraid to use it. As the days turned into weeks, I felt a mixture of anger and relief. I had no intention of getting swept back into her emotional games. But every time we had to meet, I found myself wrestling with old feelings of sadness and betrayal. One particularly tense session, we sat across from each other, our lawyers barking back and forth like dogs. Emily's frustration was palpable, and I could see her trying to maintain her composure. But then she made a critical mistake. She dropped her guard for a brief moment. You know what, Ilya? She said, her voice shaking slightly. You think you're so much better than me now, but you're not. You think this is some kind of game? You'll see, this will ruin you. I won't let you walk away without a fight. The venom in her words caught me off guard, and for a moment, I could see the mask slipping. You're right, Emily. I don't want to walk away. I want to be free. Free from the lies and betrayal that have poisoned this marriage. That seemed to cut deep. For the first time, I saw a flicker of uncertainty cross her face. The confidence she had worn like armor was starting to crack. As the divorce proceedings continued, I focused on my own healing. I began spending more time with friends and family, reconnecting with parts of my life that I had neglected. I took long bike rides to clear my mind and find some solace in the open air. But Emily wasn't done yet. One day, I got a call from my lawyer with news that she was trying to contest the divorce, claiming that I had emotionally abused her and was intentionally trying to ruin her reputation. The accusation shocked me. It felt so far from the truth that I didn't know whether to be angry or amused. We had a heated discussion about her claims during the next mediation session. This isn't about you, Emily, I exclaimed, my frustration boiling over. You can't just turn this around on me because you don't want to accept the consequences of your actions. She shot back. You think you can play the hero? You think you can just walk away and forget everything? You're going to regret this. Her desperation was palpable. It was as if she thought she could manipulate me back into her life, back into her web of lies. But I was done. I stood firm, ready to face whatever obstacles she threw at me. As the days wore on, I started to see a light at the end of the tunnel. I realized that as much as she was fighting to keep me tied to her, I was finally taking control of my life. I wasn't going to let her darkness drag me down any longer. The day came when I finally had to testify about everything that had happened, and I felt a strange sense of calm wash over me. I was ready to face the truth, ready to share my side without fear or shame. And when it was over, I felt a sense of closure beginning to take root. The day of the final hearing arrived, and I could feel the tension crackling in the air. Emily's lawyer was aggressive as always, and Emily sat beside him, her expression hard and unyielding. But today, I was ready. I was prepared to lay everything bare, and I wasn't going to let her spin the narrative anymore. As the session began, I took a deep breath, focusing on the evidence I had meticulously gathered. The texts, the bank statements, the testimonies from friends who had seen the changes in our relationship, all of it was ready to back up my truth. When it was my turn to speak, I stood up, my hands steady but my heart racing. I began detailing our relationship, sharing the moments that had once brought us joy and the slow unraveling of trust. I spoke about the nights I'd waited up for her, the countless times I had tried to reach out, only to be met with silence or dismissiveness. I talked about how I'd finally realized that I was holding on to a ghost of the woman I had once loved. I could see Emily's face shifting through a range of emotions: disbelief, anger, and eventually despair. I pressed on, detailing the evidence of her affair with Max, how she had actively chosen to betray our vows, and how she had twisted the truth into a story that painted her as the victim. Her lawyer tried to interrupt, but I stood firm. This isn't just about one mistake. This is about a pattern of deceit. I loved this woman, and she threw it all away for someone who was nothing more than a distraction. I can't rebuild a marriage built on betrayal. When I finished, the room fell silent. I could feel the weight of my words hanging in the air. I had finally said everything I needed to say, and I had done it with dignity. I felt an unexpected rush of relief as I returned to my seat. Then it was Emily's turn. She stood, her expression hardening into something almost unrecognizable. "I don't understand why you're doing this," she began, her voice shaky but filled with feigned confidence. "You act like I'm the bad guy, but what about you? You never listened to me. You never cared enough. You pushed me away." I could see the walls she had built around herself, but I wouldn't let her tear down the progress I had made. "You chose to cheat, Emily. You chose to betray me. Don't try to deflect this onto me." Her eyes narrowed, and for a brief moment, I saw desperation flash across her face. She tried to spin the narrative again, to make me look like the villain in this story. "You're going to regret this when everyone knows the truth. You were never there for me. You're just bitter because I found someone who actually cared." But the more she talked, the weaker her argument became. I could see the cracks in her facade, the anger bubbling just beneath the surface. The lawyer's attempts to steer the conversation were fruitless. The judge remained silent, letting Emily dig her own grave. Finally, the judge spoke up, her tone firm but understanding. "Ms. Hall, while emotional neglect is a serious matter, it does not justify infidelity. The evidence presented here suggests a deliberate choice to betray trust in a marriage. I encourage you to reflect on that." Emily's face fell. For a moment, she looked vulnerable, stripped of her bravado. But then the anger surged back, and she shot me a venomous look. "This isn't over, Ilya. You haven't seen the last of me." I felt a wave of finality wash over me. "I'm sure I will, but I won't be running back to you. I'm moving on." As we left the courtroom, I felt lighter, like a weight had been lifted off my shoulders. The battle was finally coming to an end, and I could see a future where I wasn't tied to her chaos. The divorce was finalized shortly after that, and while the emotional aftermath took some time to process, I knew it was the right decision. I started to reclaim my life, reconnecting with friends, exploring new hobbies, and even taking a few spontaneous trips. I began to rediscover the things I loved outside of my relationship with Emily. Eventually, I decided to dive into a new passion: writing. I started to document my experiences, not just as a therapeutic outlet, but as a way to share my journey. I wanted others to know that it was possible to rise above the pain of betrayal and take control of your life again. As I typed the final words of my first story, I felt a sense of closure. I had faced the darkest moments of my life, and I had come out stronger. I was ready to embrace whatever came next, without the weight of Emily's deceit holding me back. In the end, I had learned that sometimes the hardest choices lead to the brightest paths. And as I stepped into that newfound freedom, I knew I was finally free to write my own story,